right, so peace and power and elevation be to all you beautiful people out there. What's going on? This your girl Tiffany coming through here live in the Fed. Live in the Fed. So thank you guys for tuning in, and thank you guys who have been subscribing to my channel, liking my channel, sharing my channel, all that great stuff. Continue to do so, okay? So today's topic, I'm going to get back into Black history. All right. So I want to talk about Harrison N Bouey. So who was Harrison N Bouey and what did he do? So he was known as a minister in the South Carolina, Arkansas area. Okay. And he was also a missionary. He helped African descended people to immigrate back to Africa after the Reconstruction era. All right. So during this time period, that's when the American Colonization Society started building the colony over there in Africa, and what is West Africa now, what is known as Liberia. So the American Colonization Society helped put that colony together in West Africa region. Okay. All right. So if anybody study about the history of Liberia and Sierra Leone, right, you will understand that there were people that were African Americans that migrated over into those areas. Okay. But with Sierra Leone, you have like the Creole people, for example. They are African American, descendant African Americans, Afro Caribbean people, and liberated Africans. That means Africans who were not sent off into slavery. Okay. And then the Liberian people is mostly consists of African American people who are African American descent. So they are what you call Americo-Liberio. All right. Those people are called Americo-Liberio. But yeah, you will see that they come from a descent a lot of African American people, and they carry on a lot of our customs there as well. Okay, they carry on a lot of our customs. All right. So yeah, so I mean the information gets very interesting. So I'm gonna go into all that. Shout out to the chat. Peace to my brother Umi. Thank you for coming through. All right, make sure y'all subscribe and like the channel, share the channel, etc. Okay. Now let's go ahead and get started. So as you can see, I got the source, and I got books that I want to share with you guys as well. All right, so according to the source from Wikipedia, Harrison N Bouey was born August the 4th of 1849, and he died December 15 of 1909. And he was a minister in South Carolina, Alabama, and Missouri. Okay. And he was a missionary in Liberia. He was noted as a leader in efforts to help Africans immigrate to Africa at the end of Reconstruction in the 1870s. He was also involved in education in the South and was an early leader of Selma University in Selma, Alabama, and a co-founder of Western College Preparatory School in Macon, Missouri. All right, so down here, it said he was born in Columbia County, Georgia. All right, as a child, he moved to Augusta, Georgia, and as a young man, he worked for 2 years as a painter's apprentice while he attended night school to get a basic education. All right, so in the mid-1860s, he passed an examination for a teacher's certificate and taught 2 years in Augusta Public School. In April 1870, he was baptized and became a member of the Springfield Baptist Church. He also entered the Baptist Theological School in Augusta, later called the Atlanta Baptist Seminary, and now Morehouse College. So for those of you that don't know, that Morehouse College was originally in Augusta, Georgia. So before it came to Atlanta, it was in Augusta, Georgia, and it was called the Baptist Theological School, right? Then when it was brought here to Atlanta, it became Atlanta Baptist Seminary. So they changed it to Morehouse College. So Morehouse wasn't always in Atlanta. It started off in Augusta, Georgia, as a seminary school, a theological school. He graduated in the spring of 1873 and moved to Rich Springs, South Carolina, to become principal of a school there. In 1875, he was elected probate judge of Edgefield County, South Carolina, by the Republican Party, which was in control of local politics there. In the fall of 1876, he was elected county sheriff, but not granted the position. In 1877, Reconstruction ended in that portion of South Carolina, and Bouey and fellow Black appointee Circuit Court clerk Jesse Jones were pushed out of their position. Bowie accused Matt Butler, Matthew Butler, of threatening to kill him, and Paris Simpkins and Lawrence Kane in a speech during Butler's successful United States Senate campaign. So who was Matthew Butler? Who was this guy that was threatening to kill him? So Matthew Butler was a Confederate soldier in an Army military commander and attorney and politician from South Carolina. He served as a major general in Confederate States Army during the American Civil War, post-bellium, three-term United States senator, and a major general in the United States Army during the Spanish-American War. So, of course, by this man being a Confederate, yeah, he was going to make a threat because he didn't want to see a black man taken into that position, taken over as a circuit court clerk. He didn't want that. He didn't want that man being in a position of power. So a lot of those Confederates, they were very, of course, they was very racist, and they had a problem if any black person stepped in and took in the higher position as far as political position. They didn't want that. So leaving politics, he then was ordained by the Macedonia Baptist Church in Edgefield Courthouse, South Carolina, shortly after he became general missionary of South Carolina, holding the position just for over a year. So it goes in to talk about the immigration to Liberia. What it says, so he next responded to a call by a group of South Carolina Baptists led by Edward M. Barley to start missionary work in Africa. Bowie, George Curtis, Benjamin F. Porter, Samuel Gallard, Martin Delaney, and others formed a joint stock steamship company of the Liberia Exodus Association to recruit as many as 300 people, equally divided men and women, to immigrate to Africa. Among those involved was William Coppinger, who sent Bowie literature to aid his cause, and John Mardenborough, who had left Edgefield County for Beaufort, South Carolina, after receiving threats on his life. In South Carolina, Bowie and Mardenborough advocated for immigration or freedom from South Carolina to Africa for both economic and religious reasons. This effort was opposed by local whites who were afraid of losing an important labor source. He sailed from New York to Monrovia, Liberia via Liverpool on April the 11th of 1879. Aboard the Azor was over 200 South Carolina immigrants. In Liberia, Bowie worked among the Gola people and helped construct a road outside of Rossville, which came to be called the Bowie Road. In Liberia, he organized a number of churches, two Baptist Association, and a National Baptist Convention, for which he was corresponding secretary and financial agent. He then returned to America as general agent for the Liberian Convention, set to enlist help for the mission from American Baptists. South Carolina's support for the Liberian mission was initially strong, but declined when Bowie resigned from this role in 1882. So let's just give a recap. So Bowie was into politics. So not only he was into politics, right? He left politics to become an ordained minister, and he got into the missionary work to gather up all the African descended people of South Carolina and immigrate them over to Africa into this new colony called Liberia. So that's what he did. And he helped to build the Liberian government along with other people, but he helped to build the Liberian government, build up the cities, put programs, churches, etc. in that particular colony. Hold on. All right, so let's go ahead and continue. So again, he worked with the Gola people. And who are the Gola people? Well, if you click on here, the Gullah people are a West African ethnic group who share a common cultural heritage, language, and history, and who live in primarily in western and northwestern Liberia and eastern Sierra Leone. The Gola language is isolated within the Niger-Congo language family. So as of 2015, it is spoken by 278,000 people. All right. So then it goes on to talk about later on in his career, right? So it talks about in March of 1882, he became Sunday school missionary for Alabama, and he held the position for 4 years. So during that period, he became financial agent for Selma University and was elected corresponding secretary of the State Mission Board of Alabama. In January 1886, he resigned from these positions to restore his health. At nearly the same time, he was chosen associate editor and business manager for the journal The Baptist Pioneer, a position he held for 1 year. And at that time, he was also a member of the Board of Trustees of Selma University, a member of the State Mission Board in Alabama, and the secretary of the Foreign Mission Convention of the United States for the 3rd District. So it says he later served as a pastor and superintendent of missions for Missouri Baptist and helped founded the Western College Preparatory School in Macon, Missouri. He again sailed to Africa in January 1902, returned to America in 1905. And on December 11, 1906, Bowie and 3 of his 4 sons returned to Africa. His 4th son joined them later. So he was married to Laura P. Logan of Charleston, South Carolina, and she passed away in 1897. So he died on December 15, 1909 at Cape Mount and was buried on the banks of Lake Pauls near the graves of Hattie J. Presley and allegedly Henderson McKinney. At his death, he requested his sons to be returned to the United States for their education, and L.G. Jordan and William R. Paddiford worked to help the boys. All right, so he passed away in Liberia. All right, so he passed away in Liberia. He died. But again, see, this is where the FBA and the ADOS folks really got to study their history. You mean to tell me that my ancestors, when they left America and they went to these places like Liberia, Sierra Leone, and Mexico, and parts of Jamaica, and Dominican Republic, and Trinidad, that we're not supposed to just honor those people? We're not supposed to acknowledge them? And they went to Haiti. You tell me we ain't supposed to recognize those people? You're crazy. You out your mind. You out your mind if you honestly believe that we should not go and study those history. We have a good reason to go to those places like Africa, because not only our ancestors was brought from that land and brought here to this place called America or the Atlantic world, but they also helped build a colony or build colonies over there in western part of Africa. And you're telling me that people should not go to Africa and pay their homage and visit? Are you serious? Are you serious? And this is why it's so important that we branch out on our own and actually do independent studies, because you're not going to get every information from secondary school, from colleges. You're only going to get narratives from individuals, from those who are predominantly European descent. That's what you're going to get. You're going to get narratives. You're not going to get, I'm going to repeat, You're not going to get this type of education. So this is why people got to do independent studies. And then the sad part about it, even some of the people in the conscious community won't be teaching stuff like this. Certain ones, but not everybody in the conscious community gonna be teaching stuff like this either. So you definitely got to do independent studies. You got to branch out and look out for yourself. I mean, read for yourself and learn for yourself. You got to be able to go out there and vacate to these places to actually learn about the monuments. That's what you got to do. All right. So let's go ahead and let me share you guys some books that y'all can read for yourselves. But before I get there, I want to go to the South Carolina Encyclopedia website. So each state, well, not every state, but certain states have their own encyclopedia website. Georgia had one, South Carolina had one, I believe North Carolina got one, Virginia, Pennsylvania. They all got their own encyclopedia website. So you can go on here and you can find the information that you need about historical events that's been taking place in each of these states. All right, so right here where it says Liberia Exodus. So it talks about Black leaders in South Carolina, including Richard Harvey Kane, Harrison Bowie, George Curtis, and the Reverend B.L. Porter responded to the interest in Black immigration by incorporating the Liberian Exodus Joint Stock Steamship Company in the spring of 1877, naming Porter as its president. Now check this out. Right here, according to this source, it says the return of the Democratic Party to the power in South Carolina in 1876 and the campaign of violence that accompanied it raised anxiety among African Americans in the state and interest in the possibility of immigration. Similar feelings towards immigration could be found across the South, where Blacks endured political weakness, restriction on their civil rights, and difficulty in finding gainful employment. In many southern states, particularly the lower Mississippi Valley, the frustration of Blacks with their poor condition caused some migrant to the western United States during the Exodus of 1879. In the South Carolina, interest in immigration became focused on the African nation of Liberia, which was more accessible from the East Coast, and because the American Colonization Society had already transported a small number of Blacks there in the years immediately following the Civil War, albeit with mixed result. So this ain't the first time Black people done went back to Africa, okay? So when you heard about the whole going back to Africa and going to places like Ghana and whatnot, it's not the first time. Black folks been trying to go back. As you can see, when they built the colony of Liberia and the area of Sierra Leone, Black people was going back then, all right? Black people was immigrating there. So this ain't the first time. And you know what's so interesting is the people in Ghana, right? The Ghanaian people, they are really intrigued by American history, African American history, especially because there were so many Blacks that came from America that went over there to Ghana. And even when Kwame Nkrumah was in the position of power, he was so influenced by Pan-Africanism. So what we learned is a lot of our brothers and sisters over there, especially those in that region, right? They are very intrigued by African American history. They learn about African Americans and the work they have done. So yes, let me go ahead and continue with the next paragraph. Black leaders in South Carolina, including Richard Harvey Kane and Harrison Bowie and George Curtis and the Reverend B.L. Porter, responded to the interest in Black immigration by incorporating the Liberian Exodus Joint Stock Steamship Company in the spring of 1877 and naming Porter as its president. The American Colonization Society, which did not have enough funds to transport the swelling numbers of Black immigrants, welcomed the formation of the Charleston-based company and lent it moral support and advice. In January of 1878, hundreds of potential immigrants from all over South Carolina converged on Charleston despite the opposition of white employers. So in January of 1878, hundreds of potential immigrants from all over South Carolina converged on Charleston despite the opposition of white employers who feared losing cheap labor. The company lacked the necessary funds for a Liberian voyage, but Porter bowed to pressure from hundreds of prospective passengers and hastily acquired a vessel, a clipper ship named the Ozark. Christen on March 21st, 1878, the Ozark set sail from Charleston a month later, carrying 206 immigrants from South Carolina to Liberia. After a 42-day passage, during which immigrants endured delays, deaths, and unforeseen expenses in Sierra Leone, they arrived in Liberia short of money and supplies. News of the disastrous crossing discouraged hundreds of black South Carolinians who were waiting in Charleston for passage to Liberia. The cost of the Ozarks' first voyage wiped out the company's capital. The company planned a commercial voyage to Liberia in the February of 1879 to raise funds, but the ship never sailed. The Ozark was sold at auction in November of 1879. Damn. Some of the Ozark immigrants returned to South Carolina disappointed, but others enjoyed success in Liberia. In 1880, one of them reported that 173 of the Ozark immigrants were still in Liberia, with perhaps others in the interior of Africa. Neither the demise of the Liberian Exodus Joint Stocks Steamship Company or the opposition of white employers persuaded black South Carolinians to give up the ideas of immigrating the state to Liberia. For at least a few years after the collapse of the company, prospective immigrants sought the help of the American Colonization Society. By the early 1890s, reports appeared claiming that several of the leading political and business figures in Liberia had come from South Carolina, including C.L. Pearson, Chief Justice of the Liberian Supreme Court, Clement Innes, who constructed the first steamship in Liberia in 1888, and the Reverend David Fraser, a member of the Liberian Senate. Okay, so again, you can check this out in on South Carolina Encyclopedia.org. So on top of that, there's also books. I always like to show books. I always like to make sure that I get the information, the proper information out. So for those who wonder or who want to read more into this, the first book that I want you guys to look into is Black Charlestians, A Social History from 1822 to 1885 by Bernard E. Powers Jr. So it goes in and talk about the black people of Charleston, South Carolina, and goes into the post antebellum. It discusses about the whole Reconstruction era, the immigration to Liberia. So it goes into all of that. So as you can see, I'm just going to show you guys a prime example, right? So on chapter 8, where it says an equal chance in the race of life, postbellum race relation, right? So it talks about slavery in the old South was more than a mere system of labor exploitation, and in its setting in which black people were owned by whites, the system also regulated race relation. The intricacies, the intricately detailed body of ordinance associated with slavery established the social subordination of all blacks. Intellectually, this subordination was justified by practical security concern, but also by a thoroughgoing and widespread beliefs in the blacks' racial inferiority. The slaves' emancipation and the rise of radical reconstruction challenged assumption about hierarchy and place in the post-Belgium South. As Charleston's black community became institutionally more complete and its leader and members more self-assured in this period, they simultaneously fought the myriad of white attempts to treat them as social inferiors. They sometimes struggle against racial segregation and claim many of the rights and privilege enjoyed by other citizens. Local activism was sometimes assisted by black and white Republican leaders who sponsored important governmental policy changes and civil rights legislation. The result of black Charlestonians' collective efforts yield a new era in race relation in which differed radically from its antebellum predecessor, as well as from the rich system of Jim Crow that characterized the late 19th and 20th century South. Okay. So again, hey, how you doing? Shout out to you, brother. What's going on? How you doing today? Thank you for coming by. Thank you for coming through. All right, so let's go down to where it speaks on I'm just going to scroll up just a little bit. Let me read something right here. It says political participation further pluralized the extreme races as specific party affiliation became a surrogate for racial loyalty. Right, largely identified with the Democratic parties, while blacks affiliated with the Republican Party, the party of Lincoln and emancipation. These tensions were further exacerbated by the militia units blacks organized to protect themselves. Incorporation into the state militia in 1869 gave them legitimacy while hiding the physical threat they posed to white. And warning of imminent danger in the summer of 1868, a local newspaper pointed out that black militia units had been steadily drilling in several places in the city, working patiently and steadily to make themselves trained and disciplined armed association. This was occurring throughout the state. The organization of these battalions had but a single objective. In the editor views, it is their avowed purpose to over overawe the white man to keep him down by force of arms. Reverend Richard H. Kane rejoined the malevolent purpose had not led blacks to organize militia unit. Instead, the units were organized to protect their rights. According to him, black men and women would respect the law, but they were also prepared to stand by their liberties and see that the liberties of their children are guarded with sleepless vigilance. Let their foes be aware. So basically, the black people in South Carolina The black people in South Carolina had their own militia unit. So this is before they had their own black revolutionary organization going on, before there was a Black Panther Party. All right, they was already doing it because they was facing so much heavy discrimination, and they was facing so much problem with these white folks that they was willing to protect themselves. And where I read in the paragraph where most of the Democratic Party was occupied by white people, and the Republican Party was where a lot of black people went to. Why? Because of Abraham Lincoln, because he was a Republican and he signed the Emancipation Bill for blacks to be freed from slavery. So that's why a lot of black folks joined the Republican Party, because they felt like they got better treatment from the Republicans. And then later on, things had a turn, right? Black people started joining the Democratic Party because they felt like they had better opportunity with the Democrats than they did with the Republicans. But originally, in the beginning, you will find out that more and more black people was involved with the Republican Party than the Democratic Party. So if people really study the origin and history about the Democratic Party, they will realize that the Democratic Party was far more worse than the Republicans, because that's where a lot of the racist people were at. Especially even the Ku Klux Klan, a lot of them were Democrats. And they were Christians, by the way. And the Democratic Party was ran by Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson ran the Democratic Party. So many people got to really get into studying about the history and the origin of the Democrats and the Republican in regard to black people, etc. Maybe one day there'll be a conversation I can have. But let me go ahead and let's skip down to the next source. All right, so let's just go ahead and let's go down to all right, so let's go down here where it says by the mid to the late 1870s, right? Several Charleston black churches had become interested in Africa as a field of missionary endeavor. Many black clergymen believed that as the most advanced group of African descent, Afro-Americans had a special responsibility in their missionary work. According to their view, the immigration of Afro-Americans to Africa and proselytizing the Christian faith among the indigenous people represented the fulfillment of the divine will. At the South Carolina annual convention of the AME Church in 1874, the pastor address declared, Africa now in her benign pagan condition must and will become enlightened and Christianized through the labor and instrumentally of her own sons and descendants, provincially educated and trained for that purpose by the grace of God. The spread of Christianity was an essential feature in the total process of African redemption, the end result of which would be an advanced civilization in which blacks throughout the diaspora would desire to participate. It says Mr. A. Wilson wrote that the first thing the black churches should do was to organize missionaries and to send them two through Africa to enlighten those who need enlightenment and to inform the enlightened we should like to come home. Weston believed that Africa was a goodly land and that it was God's provincial design for Afro-Americans to go there and enlighten their fathers. And it says many in the black community look unfavorably on immigration because the loss of population will further undercut the political strength of the black electorate. Others fear that many trained men would be attracted to Africa and their leaving would thus depel the pool of potential black leaders who were crucial to the progress of the race in America. Reverend Enoch J. Adams argued that black Americans needed to make more progress here before going to Africa, while contrasting the freedmen's degraded condition immediately after the Civil War with the tremendous progress they had made since. Adams radically asked that if black were resigned to life in America, then why couldn't they continue living in the country now? He further warned of Africa's unhygienic environment and of the superstitions of the inhabitants. In Adams' view, black Americans enjoyed the benefits of Western civilization and Christianity to an extent which could not be hoped for in Africa for generations. And if they couldn't progress here, he doubted they could do so where such advantages were absent. While Jonathan J. Wright conceded that some blacks with education and skills might usefully go to Africa, he feared that the exponents of immigration were encouraging a mass exodus of ill-prepared and ignorant persons, the end result of which would only be to take darkness into darkness. Damn. Then it said, despite opposition, the enthusiasm for immigration did not wane immediately following the demise of Reconstruction. In the spring of 1877, a correspondent for the Missionary Record reported that pro-immigration sentiments were greater than it had been for 6 years. All along the routes of the major railroads, people were inquiring how they could arrange to go to Liberia. Whites recognized the enthusiasm in the black community over the immigration issue and feared losing their workers. One contemporary noted, the papers are very careful not to offend the colored people just now, as they fear an immigration by the wholesale. To encourage immigrationist sentiments, the Reverend Benjamin F. Porter organized the Liberia Exodus Association in the summer of 1877. So I'm going to skip that because I went over that, but you can see in this book it talks about it. And it says, later Martin R. Delaney and his son St. Cyprian became officials in the company. So it says the Liberian Exodus Association and its subsidiary company hope to establish a niche in West Africa where black men and women with education can maintain position equivalent to their attainments and talents. Unless this were done, black people would be confined to a subordinate and minimal position in America. All right. So in this book, you can find plenty of information about Charleston, South Carolina, and the Liberian Exodus, and etc. Okay. So going back to the top, again, the title of this book is called Black Charleston, A Social History from 1822 to 1885, Bernard E. Powers Jr. And then going on to the next book, this one's called African American Religion from 1500 to 2000, Colonialism, Democracy, and Freedom by Sylvester A. Johnson. Okay, so it says Fleeting White Redemption, Escaders, and Back to Africa movement, right? So as you can see, it goes in, it says, as hundreds of historical studies have recounted, the Civil War settled both the question of national schism and also the future of U.S. slavery. What began as a military solution to restore a unified white republic was overtaken by the largest slave rebellion in the history of Atlantic slavery. As more than 400,000 enslaved blacks fled slavery, sabotaged the Confederacy, and took up arms to fight. The result was a violent resolution for slavery. Despite Frederick Douglass' call for peaceful abolition years earlier, it was Henry Highland Garnett's vision of armed militancy in significant measure waged by slaves themselves that actually forced the dissolution of black enslavement, right? So during the decade following the Union Army's defeat of the Confederacy, Union troops set up command stations throughout the southern states to militarize the compulsory authority behind what unfolded as a relatively progressive program of rebuilding the region's political institutions. With the exception of Tennessee, the former Confederacy was divided into 5 military zones. These were administered through military rule until their state governments could be reconstituted as multiracial political entities. Under these terms of military occupation, federal authorities implemented what has deservedly been called a program of radical reconstruction. So thoroughgoing and ambitious were the reforms of northern legislators that state legislatives assembles throughout the South soon comprised several black members. In rare instances, African Americans held office in United States Congress. Mississippi and South Carolina both boasted black majorities and sent representatives to Washington. At least a half dozen other states also elected blacks to the U.S. Congress. Most distinguished was Hiram Revels of Mississippi, who in 1870 became the sole black member of the U.S. Senate. All right, so as you can see, it goes further down. And right under here, where it says, the vision of multiracial democracy fully succumbed to white redemption in the wake of the 1876 presidential election. Rutherford B. Hayes, the Republican candidate, sealed his victory by brokering an agreement with Democrats who exacting loyalty to white rule in the American South ensured the federal troops would be withdrawn in exchange for a united front proclaiming that Hayes was indeed the rightful winner of the election. The fallout was dismissal, violent, and extreme. Unchecked by federal troops, white terrorists expanded their rule over the lives of blacks throughout the South. Under these cruel measures, African Americans began to consider anew the urgency of establishing their own separate polities to enjoy political freedoms. Between 1865 and 1868, several thousand African Americans appealed to the ACS for information about receiving assistance to relocate to Liberia. On these, 2,232 immigrated to West Africa during that period. The fact that the ACS received requests that outstripped its financial capacity indicates that many newly manumitted individuals and entire families were eager to leave the United States for a new life in a sovereign black state. When they say the ACS rates of settlement in the late 1860s were higher than at any other time in the organization's history. All right, approximately 1,600 more would leave for Liberia during the 1870s and 1880s. A total of 3,812 blacks would join the black settlers state of Liberia. Under the auspices of the ACS in the entire post-Civil War era, prior to the 1860s, the ACS had settled approximately 11,000 African Americans in Liberia. This means that one of every 4 blacks who resettled in Liberia through the ACS in the 19th century did so after the Civil War and the formal demise of slavery. This fact alone is remarkable and bespeaks a profound devotion in the part of African Americans to make self-determination a political reality, even if that meant risking their lives, uprooting partial or entire families, and leaving close or extended kin to traverse the Atlantic and attempt a new start on a different continent. All right. And you guys can check out this book. The title of the book is called The African American Religion, 1500, Colonialism, Democracy, and Freedom by Sylvester A. Johnson. All right. So make sure you guys put this book on y'all bucket list so y'all can read it for yourself, look more into it, etc. And the information regard to this can be found on page. It can be found on page 235 in this book. It starts at the page 235 to 36. It's called Reconstruction, White Redemption, and Black Cellular Colonialism. Again, Reconstruction, White Redemption, and Black Cellular Colonialism. Right? You can find it on this page on 235 to 36. Righty? Now, the next one, which is the final one, this one's called Journey of Hope, the Back to Africa movement in Arkansas in the late 1800s by Kenneth C. Barnes. All right, so here's the introduction. Well, we're gonna skip all the introduction stuff. And skip all of that, and then I'm gonna go down to chapter 1. So as you can see, it talks about Liberia Exodus, Arkansas Colony, 1877 and 1880. So for right here, it says on November 23rd, 1877, a convention of nearly 100 Black delegates and observers assembled at the Third Baptist Church of Helena, Arkansas, to make plans for a mass migration to Liberia, calling themselves the Liberia Exodus Arkansas Colony. The delegates resolved that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And whereas in the United States of North America, many of our people have been debarred by law from the rights and privilege of freemen, and even now, public segment, more powerful than law, frown us down. We are made a separate and distinct class, and against us, many avenues to improvement and eminence are effectually closed. Strangers from all lands of a color different from ours are preferred before us. Therefore, resolve that we continue to seek an asylum from this deep degradation by going to Liberia on the western coast of Africa, where we will be permitted to more fully exercise and improve those faculties which impart to man his dignity, and to evince to all who despise, ridicule, and oppresses our race that we possess with them a common nature and are susceptible of equal refinement and equal advancement in all that dignifies man, and that we are capable of self-government. And it says this eloquent statement reveals both the push and the pull motivation for immigration. The deteriorated racial climate of the American South combined with the magnetic attraction of Liberia, a stirring symbol for Black hopes. Condition in Arkansas Delta region near the Mississippi River provided the motivation for the state's first back to Africa movement, although it would prove to be short-lived. All right, so check this book out right here. And you also put this book on your bucket list, which is called The Journey of Hope, Back to Africa Movement in Arkansas in the late 1800s by Kenneth C. Barnes. And that is all that I have. So I want to say this to leave off in conclusion. Okay? In conclusion. So many of our people accepted the concept of going to going back to Africa or go to other places because they want to start a whole new life. They want to be able to establish their own government and be able to regulate their own system, have their own rules without interference from those who are predominantly European, right? So Liberia was a chance for many blacks to just go back and start a different life and have a different system. But many of them went back with a colonized mindset because many of them been Christianized and because many of them came up out of slavery. So just because they came out of slavery physically, they didn't come out of slavery mentally. So they carry on the ideology, what they learned from those who have oppressed them. And because of their oppressor, they carry on those oppression when they went back to the continent. And again, it's just quite sad when many people try to say things like, oh, we don't need to go back to Africa, this, that, and other. And it's like, well, why should we not go back to Africa? I mean, you don't have to go back to Africa to live. You can go back to Africa to visit. At least, take a vacation. Many of us like to go vacate to Europe, right? Many of us like to go vacate to part of South America, go to the Caribbean, which is also great. But what's wrong with taking a vacation in Africa? What's wrong with taking a vacation in Africa? What's wrong with being able to go and study and learn about the historical events that has happened? Look at the monuments or whatnot. It's like you can't rewrite these histories because it's right here. It's been here for a long time. And even when you go to historical sites, those are the evidence to show you what has been taking place. So no matter what somebody try to do, they can try to rewrite something. They can try to create their own narrative, but you can't rewrite the events that's happening. Now, we have to have a very honest conversation here. So I'm going to bring up something that might make some people mad, but it's okay. I understand. So I had a conversation with a good friend of mine, well, with somebody that I know on Facebook. And we had a conversation about slavery and how our people got here into this land. And that person said something that was profound. He said, well, you got to understand, the reason why many of them came over here as slaves was not just because of the fact that they was trading with the European. It was because of the system they had, the institution they was operating under. And I said, well, what do you mean by that? That's when he broke down as far as like the spiritual system that many of them was following. The spiritual system that many of them was following, right? The institution, they made the institution out of them. So wherever, let's say if somebody commit a crime or if a group of people committed a crime or something, they guilty of those crimes, those people were going to be prisoners of war, right? But sometimes they also put those who were innocent along with those who were guilty as well. So what he was getting at was there were people that used spirituality as a way to convict people who they felt that was guilty of a crime or guilty or broke the laws that they had intact as far as the institution is concerned. And then, I mean, I can see that happening. Now, I'm not saying that every tribe did that, but it's a multiple things that took place. It was some multiple factors that happened. There were those who operate under the institution, under the spiritual system they had, and there were those who would want to trade with the foreigners, right? And there were those who were coerced into selling their people over to the Europeans. There was those who were coerced to do so. So it was multiple factors. It wasn't just one particular reason why they did it, right? It was multiple reasons. It was economic reasons. It was some with spiritual reasons because they was part of a spiritual institution, right? And there were those who were forced, by political reason as far as like they was being coerced to do it. Because if they didn't do it, then they was going to end up suffering the consequences. But then the same people that played a part into trading these Africans over to the European, they end up getting enslaved themselves. So they thought that they were exempt from slavery. They felt that, okay, well, if we trade these people off, we don't have to worry about anything. We're good to go. And that was not the case, because those people end up being traded off. So what I'm saying is, we're not only a descendant of those who were enslaved, but we also was a descendant of those who sent our ancestors off into slavery. We were a descendant of those who were rulers. We was also a descendant of those who played their part in the that transatlantic slave trade as well. We also a descendant of those people. I mean, and we just got to accept that reality. And it's very hard to learn about these histories, right? It's very hard. So, but once you start studying, it's like you just gotta accept that these things happen, these things took place. Now I want to share something. Someone told me that well, I've been told several times that I look like a Fulani person, that I look like I belong to a Fulani tribe. There'll be a strong possibility that I probably am a part of the Fula tribe, or I have some Fula in me. There's a strong possibility, because a lot of the people came up out of Senegambia area for one, and then later on they came up out of Nigeria. But most of the people came up out of Senegambia, and like 30% of those people, they were Muslims. So it's a strong possibility that I got Fula in me, and I got a descendant that was Muslim, or that was a Muslim at one point. So I won't argue against that, but it's a strong possibility. It's a very strong possibility, and I thought that was very interesting, because I hear that a lot. So it came from a sister that I know that's from the continent, and she a Fulani, and she looked at me and said, "You look like a Fulani." And then another brother told me that prior to that, that I look like a Fulani, and I think he's from the Ivory Coast, and he's Muslim. And I just thought that was very interesting. I mean, there is some form of resemblance, but yeah. I thought it was very intriguing. I wouldn't doubt that if I have Fulani in me, or if I have Yoruba or Igbo, I wouldn't doubt it, because I probably do. I really don't know a whole lot about my history as far as like my bloodline is concerned. You know what I'm saying? So it could be a strong possibility. All right, so let me go ahead. Have you ever been back to Africa? No, I haven't. I've never been back to Africa. So for those of you that are asking, have I ever been to Africa? No, I have not been to Africa, okay? I would love to go to Africa. I would love to go to visit the motherland. I would love to go visit the people. I would love to learn about the culture, etc. I would love to learn about the history. You know what I'm saying? The foundation. That's what I would love to learn. So I wouldn't have no problem going back to Africa. But no, I never been back. Never. All right, so that's all I have for today. So thank you guys for tuning in and watching. And I hope you guys have a good one. I hope you guys be safe. And until next time, may peace and power elevation be to all of you. And this your girl, Tiffany. And I'm logging off saying deuces. And I will talk to you guys later. And check me out tomorrow, because I'm going to be doing a subject about spirituality and science. So check me out on the next day. So we're going to talk about, did science come out of school of spirituality, or philosophy, or both? So it's going to be a good subject. So I will make sure that I have the materials that I need to go through that. All right. But until then, y'all take it easy on yourself, and be safe. And make sure you subscribe to the channel, like the channel, share the channel, etc. And I'll talk to you guys later. All right. Peace.